if we want to put ourselves in a position to compete for the best players in the world, and we believe we are the best league in the world, we had to face some really important existential questions like that one.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Deal. I'm Jason Kelly alongside my partner, Alex Rodriguez. We are so excited to have a good pal of mine join the podcast, join The Deal. It's Jessica Berman. She is the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League. Hey.
Hi. So fun to be with you.
Well, I'm very excited for the two of you to meet officially because I talk about you all the time. We've talked a lot about women's soccer on this show. It's having an incredible, more than a moment right now. But as we get underway of your season here, what's the vibe? What are you learning? What's sort of the underlying business feel like to you?
Well, first of all, it's fun to be with you, and I know that you're our number one fan, Jason. So excited to bring Alex along. I love that you use the word vibe in your question because we actually just concluded market research with our fans, and the number one word used to describe the NWSL unprompted across our data set was vibes. That was actually the word. Yes. That is actually the word that our fans use when they were asked the question, what word do you think of when you think of the NWSL? They said vibes, but you have to put an S. It's plural, vibes.
Okay.
So
All right.
we're spending a lot of time thinking about what that actually means and how we make sure we continue to do the things that make people feel the vibes. But the vibes are good. We had 3 weeks of our season already in 2025, and everything has been incredible. We launched our first ever original content docuseries called For the Win on Amazon Prime, which really helped with our priority this season of storytelling. We did a full takeover of Times Square where we had our players' full body images projected in the center of Times Square for the full 4 weeks of the start of our season. We opened with the Challenge Cup with basically a rematch of the championship between the Orlando Pride and the Washington Spirit. And just been an incredible start to the season. Of course, there's stuff on the business side too, but I know that's the stuff you're going to ask me about.
So what is the biggest business initiative for 25?
Well, we announced our Team 16 expansion deal with Denver, and that is the biggest investment ever made in the history of women's sports at one time in one transaction. Several $100 million committed to be invested in Denver with a purpose-built facility, both stadium and training facility, and of course the expansion fee to the league of $110 million. And you know, because you've been covering us since before I came in here, that valuations before 2022 were in the 5 million range. So franchise valuations have grown exponentially, and our most recent transaction is a testament to that, and spending a lot of time with Boston and Denver, making sure they're ready to launch a year from now, basically.
Jessica, I have a friend that is part of the LP group of Denver, and I can tell you that they're wildly excited about the opportunity, about the investment, about the early feedback from season tickets, and all the excitement they've piloted. It's been really through the roof. My question is, you mentioned in 22 sub $5 million, and now you're talking about north of 100. Is there any concern as the leader of the league that values are rising too quickly, and is that sustainable? How do you feel about that?
It's definitely an appropriate question to ask. We look at it through the lens of really twofold. Number one, to ensure that demand significantly outpaces supply so that we can see a path to the continued growth in the future. And ultimately, those are the underpinnings of the economic analysis that will continue to drive value, but also looking at the core tenets of our business. And a lot of what we've worked on over my first 3 years here is really building the operational rigor and professionalization of the league office. And we've built out an entire business operations team that's working hand in hand with our clubs to help them to drive revenue. And so ultimately the thing that drives valuations from a metrics perspective is revenue multiples. And so we got to keep driving up those repeatable revenue sources, looking at sponsorship, ticketing, and media rights. We're in the second year of a 4-year deal in our current media rights cycle. And most recently, we had our most watched game ever on ESPN, which was incredible to have and see. And to just continuing to see the growth in each season with those big moments that we're going to continue to drive towards throughout the 2025 season.
Yeah, Jessica, so one quick follow-up on that. So second year of a 4-year deal. It's obvious the metrics suggest that you've overperformed, right? Which is always good. You know, a guy like Roger Goodell with the NFL, he has an opt-out clause and he can take advantage of the metrics that they're doing. A, do you feel like, oh, I left some on the table? Or do you just kind of pack your lunch and get ready for the next negotiation and say, buckle your seatbelt, we're coming hard and we're coming strong?
Good question. We went 4 years very intentionally, which was much shorter than any of our new partners wanted us to go. And we did that because we felt like we needed enough consistency as an emerging challenger property to establish the viewership numbers year over year and also bring our sponsors to the table to support the investment in advertising so that our 4 partners hopefully want to renew with us and want to have those discussions. And of course, it'll give us an opportunity to go to the broader marketplace to make sure we're evaluating all the options for the league. But we really wanted to have our deal be long enough that each of Amazon, ESPN, CBS, and Scripps Ion had skin in the game to be able to invest in us. Because no matter how much we spend in marketing, we will never be able to match what the value of an investment is when, for example, in March Madness, when ESPN and CBS were running lower thirds and ads for the NWSL, when they had 10 to 15 million people tuning in for men's and women's March Madness, that is so valuable to us. And if we had an opt-out or if we had a 2-year deal or even a 3-year deal, I'm not sure it would make sense for them to invest in us the way that we're seeing them invest in us. And we really want them to view us as partners, and we're growing this business together. We want them to be winners in this, and we want to over deliver for them in every single year of the deal so that they feel good about their investment.
And so as you look across those media partners, just sticking with this leg of the business for a second, Jess, as you look across it, what have you learned about your viewer? What have you learned about the product when it comes to the watchability of it? What different platforms deliver in terms of demos? Like what are the key learnings from the media side so far?
Yeah, so far, our average age is one of the lowest, if not the lowest, across all live rights holders, which is consistent with what we would have thought from ticket sales and other research we've done. So that's good. Check. That's what brands are looking for. Our audience is very multicultural. Our audience skews heavily female or more heavily female than other sports, not exclusively. I believe we're around 60 to 65% female as of the latest data. And we know that women control 80% of household spend. And so really triangulating that from a business perspective is super important. We also know that the audience is very balanced, even for us, in terms of people watching on linear and people watching on their devices or streaming. The advent of fast channels and being able to have our games in places and spaces where people consume live content, it isn't just on streaming, but it is an important vehicle for us to reach particular fans who are not watching traditionally, at least not week over week for particular regular season games. So we're learning a lot. Having partners like Amazon are incredible for that. They really know how to learn their customer, and they're helping us get smarter about how we serve our fans. And we're leveraging all those insights across the full slate of our platforms.
So I want to go back to expansion for a second if we can, because you've been pretty aggressive there. You talked about Boston and Denver coming online next year. You have made some comments recently about, continuing to expand. I think I saw something, and keep me honest here, that you think you could get to NFL size, at a 30-ish type of number, which would, I'm not that good at math, but that's close to double what you are now. What's the business case sort of city per city? What is the process you go through to make those selections and also to figure out what the right pace is?
Yeah. Well, I think at every stage of growth and at every decision point where we're thinking about our next round of expansion, you have to look at the state of the business in terms of the geographic footprint of our country and where we believe there are markets that the NWSL could be successful, which, spoiler alert, there are many. There are many markets where we are not currently operating that we know we will be successful if we had a team there. So no question on the ability for the footprint to be sustainable in terms of it continuing to scale and ultimately, yes, getting up to 30, 32 teams. The way we'll make those decisions in real time is, I think, mostly evaluated through the lens of the talent pipeline for players and technical staff, because ultimately the growth needs to really be rationalized through the lens of whether the game itself, which is our product, can support that growth. And so we're spending a lot of time thinking about how we develop the path to pro, what are the investments we should be making, how we should steer the ecosystem working with US Soccer. And a lot of those conversations are very much underway and are a specific strategic priority in 2025 for us to better understand and analyze and ultimately make a recommendation to our board so that we can be in a position of strength as we choose to expand in the future. I will say, just going back to the conversation around Denver, they announced this week that they have sold over 10,000 season ticket deposits, and that's in under 2 months. So we know the demand is there, and the success of our expansion teams will dictate and continue to build the confidence that we need to see in order to continue to expand.
So, Jessica, you have this exceptional background. You went to Michigan, then you went get your law degree at Fordham, right? You worked 13 years in the NHL, but you also worked for a smaller league in the NLL, which is lacrosse. I guess from your landscape, when you zoom out and you look at some of the great things the big three are doing in the leagues-wise, NFL, MLB, and NBA, what are some of the things that you can copy and paste from both the big blue chippers and some of the younger leagues that you think about applying to your league now?
That's exactly why I wanted to take this job, because I feel like it is the cross-section of my two tranches of experience in having worked for, yes, the National Hockey League, but also I was outside counsel for those other leagues as well, working closely with the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball, and then coming to what was really more of like an emerging challenger league in the National Lacrosse League. This league is sort of the intersection of those two worlds. So we've been able to sort of take from the bigger leagues the things that we think are replicable and make sense for us, and leave behind the things that we don't think make sense for us. And it's been very liberating, actually, to approach each decision through an innovative lens and to make affirmative decisions about what we think makes the most sense for us. One example that recently we decided in our new collective bargaining agreement to eliminate the draft, which is crazy to imagine if you come from those big leagues. I was actually the labor lawyer representing those leagues who negotiated to protect and build the infrastructure to support things like reserve systems, salary arbitration, and the draft. And so I understand the value of those things. And when I came to this league and really analyzed it through the lens of what makes sense for our business, it didn't satisfy our analysis. And so we made the very audacious and bold decision to actually negotiate with our player association to get rid of it. So imagine a world, Alex, where every player who's not under contract is a full free agent from the day they come into the league. And that's the situation in our league, really built around this idea that we're building a player first league where players have the, I call it lowercase a, agency where they want to play. And I think for women in particular, that's important, but it's also just important given the global competition we face for player talent, where in soccer, outside of the US, there is no such thing as a draft, and there is no such thing as a reserve team, and there definitely is no such thing as salary arbitration. And so if we want to put ourselves in a position to compete for the best players in the world, and we believe we are the best league in the world, we had to face some really important existential questions like that one.
Just before we leave this no draft conversation, like, what's the risk there? Like, what's the risk you had to analyze in making that bold of a decision? Because I'm guessing that didn't just like sail through the board. Like, I'm guessing with some pretty vibrant discussion, shall we say? Like, how did that go?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say vibrant discussion, not just with the board, but even internally at the league office, to really challenge ourselves to ask the question, is this the right decision? I would say there are two potential risk factors, which we obviously got over, but that we considered very heavily. The first is that in a world where we're all looking for 365 days a year programming, the draft for professional sports leagues is a really helpful touch point with fans in the off season. So it creates stories, it gives people a reason to pay attention, it shortens the off season from a content and promotion perspective, and those things actually matter. So, we are still thinking about how we're going to fill that gap, because we did not fill that gap this past year, and we felt it in the off season, candidly. So we, whether we do a combine or something else that is a relevant touch point in the off season, that is a very useful output of the draft. The second thing that would be a risk around it that we considered is a world where we are not in a position to preserve the competitive balance or parity that we have in our league. And the draft is a very useful mechanism for forcing the redistribution of talent. That's one of the main purposes that it serves. In our league, because we have a salary cap and because there are minimum spends, and because we are the best league in the world in terms of visibility, in terms of investment, in terms of infrastructure, we believe that there's incentive alignment to create a forcing function because of the markets, because of essentially the free markets, for our owners to continue to invest and lure players to their market with all of the reasons why a player should choose to come there. And if that's not happening, then the league has to think about what other levers we can pull to ensure that there's distribution of talent across the league, which we will and are continuing to measure. But those are really the two pieces of it. And we really feel like ultimately the salary cap is the most important safety net to avoiding a situation where there's haves and have-nots and we don't have a compelling product on the field.
So, Jessica, you sit there as the leader and the commissioner of this league, and we talked about other metrics so far on what's going up and to the right in your league. Maybe what are one or two things that are challenges that keep you up at night?
One challenge is really just a virtue of the country we live in, which is that there's just such competition for people's attention and for people's disposable income. That is across all entertainment and sports. And I'll go like even closer to our world, I would say soccer in particular. It is both amazing and a challenge that there's just about to be a tidal wave of soccer coming in to our country. I think the good will outweigh the challenges, but it is something that we are watching, because it used to be that access to the best soccer in the world was hard to find, and the Men's World Cup's going to be here next year. Now, those are the men, so I think distinguishable in that way. We are the best women's league in the world, so if you want to watch the best women's soccer in the world other than at the World Cup, which happens once every 4 years, you would look to the National Women's Soccer League. And we think because of that, there is incredible tailwinds for us in our future. And back to your question, the challenges around all of the touch points that are going to be flowing into the market over the next few years around the sport of soccer and sports in general there's just a lot of clutter. Like the fall, you have the NFL, you have college football. In the spring, you have March Madness, and then you go into the early part of the summer and you have NBA playoffs and NHL playoffs. Like almost every single summer, in the middle of the summer, you have Olympics, you have the World Cup. There's no matter where you turn.
And don't forget about baseball.
Don't forget about baseball.
I was waiting.
Don't forget about baseball. There's just a lot of competition. And so that's sort of first piece of it. I think just like the second piece of it is just, I think a product of having achieved some really quick success. Like we really have transformed the business in such a short period of time. And I think back to my first few months in this job where the expectations were so low. They were so low. And in just 3 years, literally it's my 3-year anniversary on this job next week. In just 3 years, the expectations have gone from literally non-existent to you should be competing with the best properties in the world. And when are we going to have, multi-billion-dollar media rights deal? The expectations are very high, and I think that creates some challenges because there's in order to have sustainable growth, it has to be measured, it has to be consistent, it has to be strategic, it has to be sustainable.
And Jess, not to add to your worry pile and keeping you up at night pile, but like the thing, and you and I have talked about this now for several years, is this whole notion of the world catching up. And, you see what's going on with the WSL specifically in the United Kingdom. You see other investments in Europe and South America and elsewhere. What are the specific things you're doing to ensure that the best players continue to play in your league?
Well, I think it's leaning into our strengths. So, number one, this is a country that is capitalistic, and brands like to spend money in advertising. And if you play in this league, you will be a star. You will be a star. If you are a top player, you will be a star. And I don't think that's true in most other countries in the world. And
by being a star, you mean you'll get paid?
You'll get paid. You'll get paid. Yeah. I mean, again, we have a salary cap in place, and that's to ensure the long-term sustainability of this league, which I think is critically important. And our country should be able to support making sure that, as it does with NIL, as it does in so many other places, like if you are a star and you are top talent, you will get paid. I don't think that's not a problem that keeps me up at night. So that's point one. Point two is I think our single most important superpower is that we are an independent league. We are independent from the men's league, and we are independent from the federation. And there is no other professional women's soccer league, and candidly, most women's leagues in general, sit nestled within the men's league or the national governing body. What that means is that there are times when you can't make the decision that it's in your own best interest only. And we get to make decisions that are only in our own best interest. When I go to my owners meeting next week, we are going to sit in a room and talk about the things that we need to do to drive the growth of the NWSL to be the best league in the world from a player, from a fan, and from an organizational perspective. And anything else outside of that matters only to the extent it matters to us. And that's not always the case in terms of how decisions are made in other places. And if I'm a player, I want to be in a place that's investing for me and for the growth of me and my sport, and not calibrating it based on other factors.
So Jessica, do you find it an asset or a liability that some of your owners own both the male and the women sports and soccer?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I appreciate the question, particularly in the context of my last answer. Because what I was talking about was from a league perspective in terms of our holistic enterprise level strategy. I think from a team perspective, there's incredible economies of scale and efficiencies that can be achieved with shared ownership structure, so long as, I will say, through the lens of, let's say, the NWSL and NWSL teams, so long as the investment is being made independently for the women's team. I think what oftentimes happens with the property of the two that is a challenger property, or the one that is in high growth, but maybe not quite there yet in terms of the number of zeros it's generating in revenue, is that it's secondary or off the side of someone's desk. And it actually should be the primary driver of investment for growth, because it is the thing that has the most upside. And unless there's somebody who's looking at it through that strategic filter in terms of, okay, taking a step back holistically across both of these properties, where are we going to see growth in the next 5 years? It really should be in a shared resources model from the women's team, because there's so much opportunity that has not been tapped into. And, it's not only through the lens of a women's and a men's team. For my NHL days, there were teams that were shared resources with NBA, NHL. And similarly, back in the day, now I'm taking you back like 20 years ago or more, when the NHL was more of a niche property, we used to say the same thing to our NBA owners, which is like, we love that you're sharing resources and you have economies of scale and efficiencies to be able to pull different levers and achieve some savings and or increase profitability. And if you don't separately resource the NHL team in that context, you're not going to see it grow. It's not going to reach its maximum potential. And it's the same thing here. And so I definitely do not consider it a liability. I consider it a benefit. And we want to always remind our owners who have those shared resources to separately resource the NWSL team so that it can maximize its upside.
All right, before we get to our lightning round, I did have one last question on the ownership side, because we've had a number of owners on the show. One was Carolyn Tish-Blodgett, obviously owner of Gotham, and her family deeply involved, to say the least. They own the New York Football Giants. I mean, there has been, and Jessica, you and I have talked about this as well over the years. There has been this different caliber, I shall say, I'm going to say it. You don't have to say it. I'll say it. Different caliber of owner that has come into this league under your stewardship. I turned on the TV a couple weekends ago, and there you are at BMO Stadium, sitting with Willow Bay and Bob Iger, and they're obviously relatively new owners in the league. What do you say to a new owner in terms of the expectation of commitment, whether that is time, whether it's financial resource, now that might be different than what you said 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, great question. And I would also say different from what I used to say at the NLL or even at the NHL. Well, the things that are the same are that our expectations are that you have a long-range view on capital and that you're here for the long haul. This is not a place for investments where you're looking for a quick turn or an immediate ROI. And we like owners who think of this as an intergenerational asset. That is not that much different from other sports leagues. So that's where we're similar. The place where we're different, which candidly I love, particularly through the lens of the kinds of people who are sitting around my board table, is that the unique element of our ownership group is that many of them, almost all of them at this point, have the financial wherewithal to really build a league and are excited to roll up their sleeves and really be part of building something. Many of our owners have told me that it feels almost like a startup where we're asking them for a lot of time. We're asking them for their ideas. We're giving them an opportunity to debate and discuss different strategies and tactics for growth. This isn't a league that is at its 100th year birthday and you sort of have all the basic tenets built. And yes, there are decisions you have to make along the way, but the league is already sort of established and you're sort of steering it through its different cycles of growth. We just signed our first real media deal in 2024, literally last year. And so the path as we move forward has a lot of opportunity for input. And what I tell new owners coming in is our expectation is that you're going to serve on committees. You're going to show up at board meetings. You're going to spend time talking to me and other executive leaders here who need and want your input. And we're probably going to ask you to pick up the phone and make phone calls for us because we're trying to close sponsorship deals. We're trying to bring on new partnerships. We're trying to understand the broader ecosystem. And so that's not for everybody, but for our ownership group, they've really enjoyed it. People like Alan Waxman and Mark Wilf and Carolyn Tisch, you know, they might jokingly say, like, I spend more time on that than I spend on some of my bigger properties, but they also will tell you that they're enjoying it and having a lot of fun.
They secretly love it. You know that.
I know they do. I do know they do, and they like to complain about it too.
Exactly. Yeah. We all love to complain about the things that we love. Although I never complain about the deal. I never complain about spending too much time on the deal or spending too much time with Alex. All right. So let's do the lightning round. It's 5 questions. We're going to bounce it back and forth. All we ask is you keep it tight. All right. I'll start and then Alex will pick up. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received on deal making or business?
Listen to what the other side actually needs to have a win.
Who's your dream deal-making partner?
I don't know if I have a person, but I would say I'll describe them. Someone who is smart, prepared, and both respected and respectful.
What's the most nervous you've ever been?
Most nervous I've ever been after I gave birth and to my first child, and imagining how I was going to parent this little blob that was crying and I didn't know what to do. It was a lot easier to run a sports league than to do that.
Amen. What's your hype song before a big meeting or negotiation?
I mean, the song that keeps coming to my mind is going to make you laugh, but I'll just say it because it just happens to be on my running mix. It's Bring 'Em Out.
Nice. That's a good one. All right. So you have had an incredible career so far. I believe your son Noah characterized you as a pioneer when you became the first woman to be a deputy commissioner when you joined the NLL. So what's your advice for someone listening who wants a career like yours?
To focus on the actual work. I think there's a lot of ways you can be distracted by things that are out of your control, or how you feel like you might be treated, what opportunities you're being given, how fair it is. All those things I think are distraction. Ultimately, my advice to people, I have a lot of quotes in my house and around my office. One of my many quotes is the Serenity Prayer, which is essentially to focus on the things you can control. And that's what I've done for most of my career. And I think people who do that save a lot of energy and don't waste time with things that drain your emotions and are counterproductive to getting to your goals.
Jessica Berman, she is the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League. I'm very excited we made this happen. You and I were texting a couple weeks ago. It's like, we got to get together. I didn't do that just to get you on the show, but I'm glad we really made this happen. I'm excited that you and Alex got to meet. Look forward to you guys spending some time together as well. This has been a really fun story to watch and a league. And, you know, your career is a fascinating one to track. So I've been very fortunate to be a witness to it and glad that we could have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
Congrats on everything.